The next morning, Hana woke up before her alarm clock. She had always been an early riser back on Earth where the sunrise meant it was time to start training. Her body still followed Earth time, even though the space station had its own artificial day and night cycle. Kira was still sleeping in her special waterbed that kept her skin moist during the night. Hana quietly got dressed and decided to explore the station before classes began. The corridors were mostly empty except for a few maintenance robots that cleaned the floors with quiet efficiency. She found the gym area after following several wrong turns. The space was enormous with equipment designed for dozens of different body types and species. Some machines looked familiar, like the weightlifting equipment, though it was much lighter than what she was used to on Earth. Other devices were complete mysteries with controls labeled in languages she could not read. A few early rising cadets were already working out. Hana watched. A four-armed insect being used all her limbs to operate a complex coordination trainer, while a floating gas creature practiced precision movements with tentacle controls. When Hana approached the basic workout equipment, she noticed the settings were all calibrated for much lighter gravity than Earth normal. Even the heaviest weights felt like lifting pillows. She adjusted the gravity simulator to Earth levels and began her usual morning routine. The other cadets stopped what they were doing to stare at her. A tall crystal being with blue-tinted skin approached her. His movements were graceful like a dancer, but his expression was not friendly. "Excuse me," he said in a voice that sounded like wind chimes. "You are using the equipment incorrectly. Those gravity settings are dangerous for most species." Hana paused in her exercise. "These are normal Earth settings," she explained politely. "I am just doing my regular workout." The crystal being, whose name tag read June, looked shocked. "Normal," he repeated. "You mean your species exercises under crushing gravity like that every day?" Before Hana could answer, another cadet joined the conversation. This one was female with 4 muscular arms and skin that looked like polished metal. Her name tag said Mina, and she carried herself like a warrior. "I have heard about Deathworlders," she said in a voice that was both curious and suspicious. "They say your people are unnaturally strong because your world tries to kill you every day." More cadets were gathering, now drawn by the unusual sight of someone exercising under Earth gravity. A small crowd formed around Hana equipment, and she began to feel uncomfortable with all the attention. She finished her workout quickly and headed back to her dormitory to prepare for classes. But even in the shower, she could not shake the feeling that she was being watched and judged. Every movement she made seemed to fascinate or frighten the other students. Breakfast in the dining hall was awkward. Hana sat with Kira, who tried to make normal conversation, but other cadets kept staring at them. Several groups of students would start whispering when Hana walked past their tables. The worst part was that some of the instructors seemed to be watching her too. During their first academic class on galactic history, Professor Zenth kept calling on Hana to answer questions about Earth conflicts. When she gave accurate answers about human wars, the professor would shake his head sadly. "Such violence," he would say. "Your species has a very troubled past. I hope you can learn more civilized ways here." Hana felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment, but she kept quiet. She knew that human history was full of wars and conflicts, but every species had fought battles. The difference was that humans had kept detailed records of their mistakes while other species seemed to prefer forgetting theirs. The real problem started during physical training class. Instructor Vextai was a tall, elegant being with silver skin and 6 graceful arms. She explained that all cadets would wear neural dampeners during combat exercises to ensure fair matches between different species. The dampeners are calibrated to give everyone equal strength, speed, and reflexes, she announced. This prevents accidents and ensures that training is about skill, not physical advantages. Hana nodded and allowed the technician to attach the device to her neck. It felt cold against her skin, and immediately she noticed her movements becoming slower and less precise. The dampener was suppressing her natural abilities to match the baseline of weaker species. For the first sparring session, Hana was paired with Tai, a crystal being who moved like flowing water. His fighting style was beautiful too. Watch all smooth transitions and elegant techniques. But even with the dampener limiting her abilities, Hana found his attacks easy to predict, and counter her own fighting style looked crude, compared to his direct, powerful movements that focused on ending conflicts quickly rather than looking graceful. But it was effective. Tai found himself on the ground 3 times in rapid succession, looking confused and frustrated. After class, Hana overheard him talking to his friends. "She fights like a wild animal," he complained. "There is no art to it, no beauty, just raw aggression." The comments hurt more than Hana wanted to admit. She had trained for years to earn her place at this academy, but it seemed like nothing she did would be good enough. For her fellow cadets, they saw her as primitive, violent and dangerous no matter how polite or skilled she tried to be. Things got worse over the following weeks. Equipment began disappearing from her locker. Training schedules were changed without anyone informing her, causing her to miss important sessions. Food went missing from her meal tray when she left the table for even a moment. The harassment was subtle enough that she could not prove it was intentional, but consistent enough that she knew it was coordinated. Someone or several someones wanted her to fail and leave the academy. Kira tried to be supportive, but even she seemed nervous around Hana sometimes. When they sparred together during partner exercises, Kira would flinch if Hana moved too quickly or came too close. Even with the neural dampener limiting her abilities, Hana still seemed threatening to her gentle roommate. The worst incident happened during a routine equipment check. Hana discovered that her neural dampener had been modified. Someone had tampered with the settings to suppress her abilities even further, while other students' dampeners had been enhanced to give them advantages they should not have had. When she reported this to instructor Vextai, the teacher examined the device with apparent surprise. "Oh my," she said, "this does seem to be malfunctioning. We will have it repaired right away," but the repairs never happened. Each day, Hana training became more difficult as her dampener limited her more and more, while her opponents seemed to get stronger and faster. She began to suspect that the instructors were part of the harassment, either actively participating or simply choosing to ignore what was happening. The breaking point came during a team combat exercise. Instructor Vextai announced that they would practice 3-against-1 scenarios to test leadership skills and tactical thinking under pressure. When it was Hana's turn to be the solo fighter, she was not surprised to see June, Tae and Mina step forward as her opponents. The 3 had become the unofficial leaders of the anti-Hana faction in their class. They made no secret of their belief that Deathworlders did not belong in civilized society and should be sent back to their primitive worlds. "Remember," Vextai said, checking the neural dampeners on all 4 cadets, "this exercise is about strategy and technique. The dampeners ensure equal physical capability." But as Hana looked at her 3 opponents, she could see something in their eyes that had nothing to do with training. This was personal. They wanted to hurt her, to break her spirit and prove that humans were too dangerous to be trusted among civilized species. The match was about to begin, and Hana realized that her tormentors had finally found a way to attack her openly while making it look like a legitimate training exercise. She was outnumbered 3-1, her equipment was sabotaged, and the instructors were either complicit or willfully blind to what was really happening. As the 3 aliens circled her like predators preparing to strike, Hana made a decision that would change everything at the academy. She reached up and quietly disabled her malfunctioning neural dampener. The massive transport shuttle shook and rumbled as it moved through the docking bay doors of Station Nexus. Hana pressed her face against the small window and stared at the biggest space station she had ever seen in her life. Thousands of lights twinkled like stars across its metal surface, and ships of every shape and size moved in and out of docking ports like busy insects around a hive. This was it, the Galaxy Military Academy, where the best and brightest from hundreds of worlds came to learn how to protect the peace between species. Hana had dreamed of this moment since she was a little girl. Back on Earth, reading stories about brave space heroes who saved entire star systems from danger. But now that she was actually here, her stomach felt twisted with nerves. She looked down at her hands. They were small and rough from years of hard training on Earth, while everyone else around her seemed so elegant and smooth. The other passengers on the shuttle floated gracefully in the low-gravity section while Hana sat in the high-gravity area, alone. A soft chime echoed through the shuttle, and a voice announced that they had arrived. Hana grabbed her single bag and followed the flow of passengers toward the exit. As soon as She stepped off the shuttle. She knew she was different from everyone else. The docking bay was filled with the most amazing collection of beings Hana had ever imagined. Tall creatures with skin that looked like living crystal, moved with steps, so light they seemed to dance rather than walk. Floating jellyfish like aliens drifted through the air using tentacles to carry their belongings. 4 armed insect people clicked and chittered to each other in languages that sounded like music, and then there was Hana, short and stocky compared to everyone else, with dark hair and brown skin that looked almost primitive next to the shimmering scales and glowing patterns of her fellow cadets. She wore the same gray cadet uniform as everyone else, but somehow it looked different on her, more practical and less graceful. As she walked through the crowds following signs that pointed toward cadet registration, Hana noticed the stares. Some aliens stopped their conversations to look at her. Others whispered to their friends while pointing in her direction. She caught fragments of words in Galactic Common, the universal language everyone was supposed to use. Deathworlder, they said, and the word seemed to echo from group to group like a warning. Hana knew what that meant. Earth was famous throughout the galaxy, but not for good reasons. Other species called it a nightmare planet where everything was designed to kill everything else. The gravity was crushing compared to most worlds. The weather was violent and unpredictable. Wild animals hunted in packs, and even the plants could be poisonous. Most aliens who visited Earth needed special suits just to survive in what humans considered a normal environment. To them, humans were like monsters who had somehow learned to use technology despite coming from a world that should have driven them extinct. The registration hall was enormous, with floating platforms that could adjust to accommodate different species heights and body types. Hana joined a line behind a group of crystal beings who were chattering excitedly about their homeworld. The conversation died when they noticed her standing behind them. One of them, a tall female with purple-tinted skin, turned to look at Hana. Her large eyes were completely white with no visible pupils, which made her expression hard to read, but her voice was cold when she spoke. "Excuse me," she said in perfectly pronounced Galactic Common, "but are you perhaps in the wrong line? This is for Military Academy." Cadets. Hana felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment, but she kept her voice steady. "I am a cadet," she said, holding up her acceptance letter. "My name is Lee Hana from Earth." The crystal being blinked slowly, then turned back to her friends. They resumed their conversation, but now it was in their own language. Quick, sharp sounds that Hana could not understand. However, she did not need to speak their language to recognize the tone of their voices. They were not happy about her presence. When Hana finally reached the registration desk, the clerk was a friendly-looking alien with soft blue fur and 6 arms. She processed Hana paperwork efficiently, but seemed surprised when she read the species designation. "Earth," she said, looking up at Hana with curious golden eyes. "We do not get many humans here. In fact, I think you might be the first one in several years." That explained some of the stares. Hana thought most species in the galaxy were content to stay on their own. Worlds are in their own systems. Humans were still relatively new to galactic society, and not entirely trusted by everyone. After registration, Hana was given a map and directions to her dormitory. The corridors of Station Nexus were wide and tall, designed to accommodate species much larger than humans. Artificial gravity kept everyone walking normally, but Hana could see adjustment panels everywhere that would let different aliens customize the environment to their needs. Her dormitory was, in the cadet section of the station, a series of connected modules that housed students from the first-year program. Each room was shared by 2 cadets from compatible species, which usually meant similar environmental needs. Hana found her assigned room and pressed her palm against the scanner. The door slid open to reveal a space that was larger than her entire bedroom back on Earth. 2 beds sat on opposite sides of the room, along with desks, storage units, and a large window that looked out into space. One bed was already occupied by luggage and personal items that clearly belonged to someone who was not human. Strange bottles filled with what looked like water sat on the desk, along with breathing apparatus that Hana had never seen before. Before she could explore further, the door opened behind her and her roommate entered. The alien was unlike anything Hana had seen before. She stood about the same height as Hana, but her skin was smooth and green with a wet-looking surface. Her large eyes were positioned on the sides of her head, and she had no visible nose, just small slits that opened and closed as she breathed. When she spoke, her voice had a bubbly quality, like someone talking underwater. "You must be my roommate," she said in accented but clear galactic common. "My name is Kira. I am from the water world of Aquanus. Welcome to Station Nexus." "Thank you," Hana replied, relieved to finally meet someone who seemed friendly. "I am Hana from Earth." Kira tilted her head in a way that reminded Hana of a curious bird. "Earth," she repeated. "I have heard of this world. It is supposed to be very dangerous. Is it true that your oceans have creatures that can swallow ships?" Hana laughed for the first time since arriving at the station. "Some of the stories about Earth are a bit exaggerated," she said. "But yes, there are some very large sea creatures on my world." The two cadets spent the next hour getting to know each other. Kira was fascinated by Earth and asked dozens of questions about human culture and biology. In return, she told Hana about Aquanus, where cities floated on vast oceans, and the inhabitants could breathe both water and air. Evening approached. Kira suggested they go to the dining hall together to get their first meal at the academy. Hana was grateful for the company and the chance to have at least one friend in this strange new place. The dining hall was massive, with sections designed for different atmospheric and dietary needs. Hundreds of cadets sat at tables talking and laughing as they ate foods from across the galaxy. The noise level was incredible, with dozens of different languages being spoken at once. Kira led Hana to the section designed for oxygen-breathing species, and they found seats at a table near one of the large windows. As they ate, Hana watched the other cadets and tried to imagine herself training alongside them. Tomorrow would bring their first classes, including the mandatory combat training that every cadet had to complete. Hana had trained in martial arts since she was young, but she wondered how her Earth fighting techniques would compare to the combat styles of other worlds. She was about to find out whether being a Deathworlder was going to be an advantage or a curse at the most elite military academy in the galaxy. The training room fell silent as the four cadets faced each other in the center of the combat mat. Around the edges, other students and instructors watched what they thought would be a routine exercise, but Hana knew better. This was a trap, designed to humiliate her and possibly injure her badly enough to force her out of the academy. June moved first, his crystal skin shimmering, as he launched what should have been an enhanced attack toward Hana left side. At the same time, Tay flowed like water around to her right while Mina prepared to strike from behind with all four of her metallic arms. Their coordination was perfect, a result of weeks of planning and practice. But something was wrong with their timing. Hana was not where she was supposed to be without the malfunctioning neural dampener suppressing her natural abilities. Hana moved with the fluid speed that millions of years of evolution on a death world had bred into every human. Her duck under June attack was so quick it looked like she had simply vanished and reappeared in a different position. The first thing her opponents noticed was that she was faster than any of them had expected, much faster than what the dampeners should have allowed. The second thing they noticed was that when Hana grabbed June's extended arm and threw him across the mat, she did it with casual ease that spoke of incredible strength. Mina's forearms blurred in a complex attack pattern that should have been impossible to counter. But Hana did not try to block or parry the strikes. Instead, she stepped inside the attack range and lifted the four-armed alien completely off the ground before slamming her down onto the training mat with controlled but devastating force. The sound of Mina hitting the floor echoed through the now silent training room. Gasps came from the watching cadets who had never seen anything like this before. Violence on their worlds was rare and usually highly ritualized. What they were witnessing was something far more primal and terrifying. Tay tried to flow away from the fight, his elegant fighting style designed for graceful retreats as much as attacks, but there was no retreating from a human who was no longer holding back. Hana caught him mid-motion and threw him into June, who was just trying to get back to his feet. Both aliens went down in a tangle of limbs. The entire fight had lasted less than 30 seconds. 3 of the Academy's most promising cadets had been completely overwhelmed by someone they had thought was weak and suppressed. The silence in the training room was broken only by the sound of heavy breathing from the fallen aliens and the quiet hum of environmental systems, Instructor Vextai rushed forward, her 6 arms moving, in agitation as she scanned the disabled cadets with medical sensors. "How is this possible?" she demanded, her silver skin shifting colors with emotion. These neural dampeners were functioning perfectly during the pre-match inspection. Hana held up her own dampener device, which she had removed completely. The modification was clearly visible now. Sophisticated electronic work that had been designed to look like normal wear and tear. Mine was sabotaged to suppress my abilities below normal, baseline levels, she said calmly. Theirs were enhanced to give them illegal advantages. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small recording device. "I have been documenting the harassment for weeks, including evidence of equipment tampering, systematic exclusion, and instructor negligence. Everything is recorded here." The color draining from Instructor Vextai's skin was visible to everyone in the room. Other instructors were arriving now, drawn by reports of an incident. Their expressions ranged from shock to fear, to something that might have been respect. But the most interesting reactions came from the other cadets. The ones who had been quietly watching the persecution of the human student for weeks were now looking at their fallen classmates with new eyes. Kira stepped forward to help Tay to his feet, but her usual gentleness was tempered with coolness. "You could have killed us," Mina whispered as she flexed her forearms, testing for serious injury. The warrior caste alien had never been so thoroughly defeated before, and the experience was clearly shaking her understanding of her own abilities. Hana knelt beside June, who was still dazed from being thrown across the mat twice in rapid succession. "Are you hurt?" she asked, her voice filled with genuine concern. "I tried to control the force, but without proper dampener calibration, it is difficult to judge safe levels." This simple act of compassion toward cadets who had spent weeks tormenting her was perhaps more shocking to the watching students than the violence itself. They had been taught that Deathworlders were savage and uncontrolled creatures who solved problems with brutal force. But here was Hana showing more care and concern for her opponents than those opponents had ever shown for her. She had not tried to seriously injure them despite having every opportunity to do so. Instead, she had used just enough force to end the fight quickly and safely. Word of the incident spread through Station Nexus within hours. By evening mealtime, the dining hall was buzzing with conversations about the human cadet who had defeated 3 enhanced opponents while fighting under suppressed conditions. Some cadets spoke in hushed whispers about the dangerous Deathworlder, while others looked at her with newfound curiosity and respect. The Academy administration worked through the night investigating the tampering incident. What they found was more extensive than anyone had imagined. Multiple instructors had been involved in a systematic campaign to force Hana out of the program. The modified equipment was just the latest escalation in weeks of coordinated harassment. But more importantly, the investigation revealed something that the anti-human faction had been trying to hide. Human combat techniques were not just about superior physical abilities. They represented a completely different approach to warfare, one that emphasized adaptation, innovation, and the willingness to break conventional rules when survival was at stake. The implications were staggering. If humans could be integrated successfully into galactic military forces, they would bring tactical advantages that no other species possessed. The question was whether the rest of the galaxy was ready to accept warriors from a world where conflict was not just common, but necessary for survival. The new combat program had been running for 2 months when the first major test came. An urgent message arrived at Station Nexus from the border systems. Pirates had attacked a civilian transport carrying refugees from a destroyed world. The local security forces were outmatched and requesting immediate assistance. Traditionally, such incidents would be handled by professional military units, with Academy cadets observing from a safe distance. But this time, Commandant Velox made an unprecedented decision. A mixed unit of human-trained cadets would participate in the rescue mission under careful supervision. Hana found herself selected as the primary tactical advisor for the mission. Her role was to help plan the operation and train the assault team in human combat methods adapted for space-based rescue scenarios. It was exactly the kind of opportunity she had dreamed about when she first applied to the Academy. The team assembled for the mission represented the diversity of the galaxy, Mina brought her warrior species' natural combat instincts enhanced by human tactical training. Tay contributed the fluid grace of crystal world fighting. Adapted for zero-gravity environments, June provided technical expertise combined with newfound understanding of practical combat applications. But it was Kira's presence that surprised everyone most. The gentle amphibian had volunteered for the dangerous mission despite having no previous combat experience. When asked why, she simply said that her people had always believed in protecting those who could not protect themselves. The journey to the crisis zone took 3 days, giving the team time to practice their new combined fighting techniques. What emerged was something unprecedented. In galactic military history, different species working together not just in coordination but in true integration. Each member fighting style complemented the others, creating tactical advantages that none could achieve alone. The human influence was visible in every aspect of their planning. Unlike traditional galactic military operations which followed rigid protocols, the team prepared multiple contingency plans. They studied the enemy patterns, looked for weaknesses in standard pirate tactics, and developed adaptive responses for changing battlefield conditions. When they finally reached the attack transport, the situation was worse than expected. The pirates had not just stolen cargo, they had taken hostages and were threatening to space them unless their demands were met. The local security forces were paralyzed, afraid that any aggressive action would result in civilian deaths. But the Academy team had trained for exactly this kind of scenario. Human military history was full of hostage rescue operations, and the tactical principles were universal. Surprise, speed, and overwhelming force, applied at precisely the right moment, could save lives that would be lost through hesitation or conventional approaches. The rescue operation lasted exactly 17 minutes. The team moved through the pirate vessel with coordinated efficiency that amazed the watching security forces. Mina's forearms allowed her to engage multiple enemies simultaneously while maintaining perfect formation. Tay's flowing movements let him navigate the cramped ship corridors like liquid mercury. June's technical skills disabled the pirates' weapons and life support systems at crucial moments. And Kira, despite her peaceful nature, proved to be devastatingly effective at non-violent takedowns. Her species' natural ability to produce paralytic secretions, combined with human grappling techniques, created a combination that could disable opponents without permanent harm. But it was their collective tactical thinking that made the real difference. Instead of charging in with superior firepower like traditional galactic forces, they used misdirection, environmental manipulation, and psychological pressure to achieve their objectives. The pirates found themselves outmaneuvered by opponents who seemed to anticipate their every move. When the rescued civilians were safely evacuated, the pirate leader demanded to know what military unit had defeated his crew so thoroughly. He could not believe that Academy students had accomplished what professional forces had failed to attempt. The success of the rescue mission sent shockwaves through galactic military circles. Requests for information about the new human-influenced training program flooded in from dozens of worlds. Military academies that had previously dismissed human combat methods as primitive brutality now wanted to understand how such techniques could be so effective. But the most significant changes were happening among the cadets themselves. The rigid social hierarchies based on species origin and homeworld advantages were crumbling. Students who had once looked down on others for coming from dangerous or primitive worlds now recognized that survival challenges created strengths that peaceful environments could never develop. Hana noticed the change most clearly during mealtimes in the dining hall. Tables that had once been segregated by species were now mixed with cadets from different worlds, sharing experiences and learning from each other. The conversations were no longer about proving superiority, but about understanding different approaches to common problems. The transformation was not limited to combat training. Academic classes began incorporating human perspectives on leadership strategy and problem-solving. Instructors found that students who had learned to think like humans were better at creative solutions to complex challenges. The Deathworld approach to survival turned out to be valuable in many contexts beyond just fighting. Even the academy physical structure began changing to accommodate the new training methods. Gravity-adjustable rooms allowed students to experience conditions similar to high-gravity worlds. Equipment designed for human-style combat training was installed alongside traditional systems. The station itself was becoming more diverse and inclusive. Professor Denth, who had initially criticized human combat methods as brutal destruction, published a paper titled Adaptive Warfare Theory: The Integration of Survival-Based Military Doctrine. His research showed that species which had faced consistent survival challenges developed military capabilities that were fundamentally different from those of peaceful civilizations. The paper argued that galactic military doctrine had become too focused on theoretical perfection and ceremonial display. Real conflicts required the kind of practical, adaptable thinking that humans had developed through necessity. What other species saw as primitive brutality was actually sophisticated problem-solving applied to the challenges of combat. As the academic year progressed, Hannah found herself at the center of discussions about the future of galactic military training. Her experiences had become a case study in how prejudice and fear could blind people to valuable perspectives. The harassment she had endured was now seen as a cautionary tale about the dangers of dismissing others based on superficial differences, but perhaps the most meaningful change was in her personal relationships. The cadets who had once treated her as a dangerous outsider now sought her friendship and guidance. They had learned that being from a death world did not make someone violent or uncivilized. Instead, it made them resourceful, resilient, and capable of protecting others when protection was needed. The academy that had once seemed hostile and unwelcoming had become a place where different species could learn from each other, where diversity was valued as a source of strength rather than a cause for suspicion. Hannah had not just earned her place at the institution, she had helped transform it into something better than it had been before. The final months of the academic year brought visitors from across the galaxy to Station Nexus. Military leaders, government officials, and academic researchers came to observe the revolutionary changes in training methodology that had started with one human cadet challenging the status quo. The Academy annual combat demonstration had become the most attended event in galactic military education. Instead of the traditional ceremonial displays of individual species fighting techniques, the program now featured integrated tactical exercises that showcased how different capabilities could work together. Hannah stood with her graduating class preparing for their final demonstration exercise. They would face a complex scenario involving multiple enemy types, hostile environments, and civilian rescue elements. It was designed to test everything they had learned about adaptive warfare and cooperative tactics. The scenario began with their unit trapped behind enemy lines on a hostile planet. Their mission was to reach and evacuate a research station while avoiding or neutralizing superior enemy forces. The exercise would test not just their fighting abilities, but their capacity for creative problem-solving under extreme pressure. What the watching officials saw was unlike anything in the history of galactic military training. The cadets moved as a true unit, with each member contributing their species' unique capabilities to overcome challenges that would have been impossible for any single type of warrior. Mina warrior instincts guided the team through combat encounters, but she used human tactical principles to minimize unnecessary violence. Tay crystal world grace allowed for reconnaissance and infiltration, but enhanced with human stealth techniques. June technical expertise provided crucial intelligence, but applied through human information warfare concepts, and Kira proved that the most effective warrior was sometimes the one who could end conflicts without fighting. At all, her combination of natural abilities and human psychological training allowed her to convince enemy forces to surrender rather than face destruction. The exercise climax came when the team reached the research station, only to discover that the scientists they were supposed to rescue were actually defectors who had been selling military secrets to hostile forces. The cadets faced a moral dilemma that had no clear solution in traditional military doctrine, but human military history provided guidance for such situations. The team separated the genuine hostages from the traitors, secured the stolen information and evacuation, all parties safely, while ensuring that justice could be served through proper legal channels. It was a complex solution that satisfied multiple competing objectives. When the demonstration ended, the applause was thunderous, but it was the questions afterward that revealed how profoundly things had changed. Officials who had come to observe an interesting experiment were now asking how quickly they could implement similar training programs in their own military systems. The graduation ceremony itself was unlike any previous academy event. Instead of individual awards based on species-specific achievements, the honors went to integrated teams that had demonstrated excellence in cooperative problem-solving. The highest award, the Commandant Medal for Outstanding Leadership, went jointly to the entire Human Integration Program. Hana stood with her classmates as Commandant Velox addressed the assembly. This graduating class, he announced, has not only mastered traditional military skills, but has pioneered new approaches to warfare that will shape galactic defense strategy for generations to come. The transformation you have accomplished extends far beyond tactical innovations. You have proven that diversity is not a weakness to be managed, but a strength to be cultivated. You have shown that the best solutions come from combining different perspectives rather than imposing uniform approaches, as individual cadets were called forward to receive their assignments. Hana was amazed by the diversity of their destinations. Mixed species crews that had once been experimental programs were now standard throughout. The fleet combat units were being reorganized to take advantage of integrated tactical capabilities. When her own name was called, Hana learned that she would be assigned to the first fully integrated exploration vessel, a ship designed to venture into unknown regions where adaptive thinking and survival skills would be more important than traditional military protocols. Her role would be as tactical advisor and cross-species liaison, but the real measure of change came in the personal conversations. After the ceremony, June approached her with genuine warmth, thanking her for teaching him that strength without wisdom was useless. Tay credited her with showing him that beauty in combat came from effectiveness, not just elegance. Mina admitted that she had learned more about being a true warrior from Hana than from years of traditional training. Even former instructors who had participated in the harassment campaign sought her out to apologize. They had realized that their fear of human capabilities had blinded them to the opportunity to learn from a species that had survived challenges their own worlds had never faced. Kira Farewell was the most emotional. They had become true friends, bonded by shared experiences and mutual respect. Despite their completely different backgrounds, they had found common ground in their commitment to protecting others and serving something larger than themselves. As the graduation festivities continued late into the night, Hana reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. She had arrived at Station Nexus as an outsider, facing prejudice and hostility from those who saw her as a threat to their civilized society. She was leaving as a graduate who had helped transform that same society into something more inclusive, adaptable, and effective. The academy that had once tried to suppress her differences now celebrated them as essential contributions to galactic security. The changes would ripple outward from Station Nexus, affecting military training throughout known space. Future generations of officers would learn not just their own species' combat techniques, but integrated approaches that drew on the survival wisdom of Deathworlds and the tactical innovations of species that had never stopped fighting for their lives. But perhaps the most important legacy was the lesson that strength came not from uniformity, but from unity. Different species working together could accomplish things that none could achieve alone. The galaxy was a dangerous place full of challenges that required every possible advantage to overcome. And sometimes those advantages came from the most unexpected sources, from species whose worlds had taught them lessons that peaceful civilizations had never needed to learn. The Deathworlder Cadet had indeed taught them about pain, but more importantly, she had taught them about growth, resilience, and the strength that comes from embracing differences rather than fearing them. As Hana prepared to leave Station Nexus for her first assignment, she carried with her the knowledge that she had not just earned her place among the stars, she had helped expand what it meant to belong there. The galaxy would never be quite the same, and neither would the definition of what it meant to be truly civilized. The investigation results were announced 3 days after the combat incident. Hana sat in the Academy Commandant's office, surrounded by senior instructors and administrative officials. The room was designed to accommodate multiple species with adjustable atmospheric controls and furniture that could reshape itself for different body types. Commandant Velox was an ancient being, whose species had evolved beyond physical form existing as pure energy contained within a specialized environmental suit. When he spoke, his voice resonated with authority that came from centuries of military service. The evidence is conclusive. He announced multiple instructors violated academy protocols by tampering with safety equipment and creating hostile learning environments. The individuals responsible have been removed from their positions and will face formal disciplinary action. Hana felt some satisfaction at this news, but she was more interested in what would happen next. The academy had a choice. They could quietly transfer her to a different program and pretend the incident never happened, or they could use this as an opportunity to learn something new. Several instructors have requested permission to study human combat techniques. The commandant continued. Your performance under unrestricted conditions has raised questions about how we approach military training. We would like you to demonstrate your fighting methods for analysis and possible integration into our curriculum. This was not what Hana had expected when she first arrived at the academy. She had hoped to blend in and prove herself through conventional means. Now she was being asked to showcase exactly what made her species different from everyone else. The first demonstration took place the following week in the academy's largest training facility. Word had spread throughout Station Nexus, and attendance was higher than for most official ceremonies. Cadets, instructors, and even visiting officials from other worlds came to see what a real Deathworld combat style looked like. Hana stood in the center of the combat ring wearing standard training gear, but no neural dampener. Around her, a holographic projection system created virtual opponents based on the most common enemy types encountered in galactic conflicts. Pirates, raiders, and rogue military units flickered to life around her. Unlike the elegant fighting styles favored by most species, human combat was brutal and efficient. Hana did not waste movement on ceremony or display. Every action served a purpose, either offensive or defensive. There was no dance-like flow, just calculated violence designed to end conflicts as quickly as possible. The watching aliens saw techniques they had never imagined: joint locks that used an opponent's momentum against them, throws that turned superior size into a disadvantage, ground fighting that continued even after opponents fell. Most shocking of all, they saw improvised weapons created from environmental objects that transformed any space into an arsenal. When the demonstration ended, the silence was complete. Nobody moved or spoke for several long moments. What they had witnessed challenged everything they thought they knew about civilized warfare. This was not the refined combat of species that had evolved beyond the need for violence. This was warfare, as practiced by beings who had never stopped needing to fight for survival. Professor Dent, the military historian from the Crystal Worlds, was the first to speak. "This is not fighting," he said slowly. "This is systematic destruction, disguised as combat techniques." Hana bristled at the criticism, but before she could respond, Instructor Vextai stepped forward. The silver-skinned being had been deeply embarrassed by her role in the harassment campaign and was trying to make amends. "With respect, Professor," she said, "what we just witnessed is the most efficient combat system I have ever seen. Every movement had a purpose. Every technique solved a specific problem. If our goal is to prepare cadets for actual combat rather than ceremonial displays, then perhaps we need to reconsider our training methods." The debate that followed was intense. Some instructors argued that human fighting methods were too brutal for civilized military forces. Others pointed out that recent conflicts had shown the inadequacy of traditional galactic combat training against unconventional enemies, but it was the cadets themselves who provided the most compelling arguments. Mina, still recovering from her defeat in the rigged match, stood up to address the assembly. "I have trained my entire life to be a warrior," she said, her forearms gesturing emphatically. "What I learned was dancing with rules. Cadet Lee showed me what real fighting looks like. If we are going to protect the galaxy from actual threats, we need to learn from the species that has never stopped fighting." Her statement started an avalanche of support. Other cadets who had been quietly questioning the effectiveness of their training spoke up. Tai admitted that his beautiful Crystal World fighting style was useless against enemies who did not follow the same rules. June acknowledged that strength meant nothing without the knowledge of how to apply it effectively. Within a week, the Academy announced the creation of a new combat track, Advanced Tactical Studies, which would incorporate human fighting methods into traditional galactic military training. The program was voluntary, but the sign-up list filled within hours. Kira was among the first volunteers. Despite her gentle nature, she had been fascinated by the efficiency of human combat techniques. "I want to learn how to protect others," she told Hana as they prepared for the first class. "You showed me that sometimes being peaceful means being prepared for war." The transformation that followed was remarkable. Cadets who had spent months learning elaborate combat forms began studying human military history. They analyzed Earth conflicts not as examples of primitive brutality, but as case studies in tactical innovation and adaptive warfare. The changes went beyond just fighting techniques. Human military doctrine emphasized teamwork in ways that other species had never considered. The concept of combined arms, where different types of forces work together to create advantages greater than their individual capabilities, was revolutionary to beings who had always thought of combat as single-entity competitions. More importantly, the human approach to warfare included psychological elements that galactic military training had completely ignored. Humans understood that battles were won in the mind as much as on the physical battlefield. The ability to adapt to changing conditions, to think creatively under pressure, and to never give up even when outnumbered had been bred into the species through millions of years of survival challenges. As the new training program developed, Hana found herself in an unexpected position. She was no longer the outcast trying to prove she belonged. Instead, she was a teacher, helping other species understand approaches to conflict that their worlds had never required them to develop. The cadets who had once mocked her now sought her advice eagerly. They wanted to understand how humans could be so effective in combat while still maintaining complex societies and moral codes. It seemed impossible to them that the same species could produce both devastating warriors and peaceful civilizations. The answer, Hana explained, was that humans had learned to separate the tools of war from the goals of peace. Fighting skills were developed not because humans loved violence, but because they had learned that sometimes violence was the only way to protect what they valued most.